All right, everybody. Pakistan's Prime Minister just announced a ceasefire effective immediately between the US and Israel on the one hand and Iran on the other hand, which should open the Strait of Hormuz for a corresponding period of 2 weeks. So does this mean that the global economic meltdown is cancelled? Let's talk about it. First, by going into what's happening with the 3 major economic crises that the war has set in motion. You have the energy crisis, the fertilizer and food crisis, and then the emerging market currency crisis, such as the Indian rupee. Then after that, we will talk about peace. How likely will the ceasefire hold up and lead to peace? But before getting into both, here's a quick update on the deal, for which I think it's best to just go to the source directly. First, here's the official statement from Iran's Minister of Foreign Affairs. On behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran, I express gratitude and appreciation for Pakistan for their tireless effort to end the war, and in response to their tweet and considering the request of the US for negotiations based on its 15-point proposal, as well as announcement by POTUS about acceptance of the general framework of Iran's 10-point proposal as a basis for negotiations, very important, I hereby declare on behalf of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, if attacks against Iran are halted, our powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operations for a period of 2 weeks. Safe passage, very important, through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations, meaning that, these ships do have to talk to the Iranian army, pay $2 million and so forth. So it is not super easy, but they are committed to doing it. And then here is Trump's response on Truth Social, based on conversations with the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to complete, immediate and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. The reason for doing this is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-time peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We received a 10-point proposal, there we have it again, from Iran and believe it's a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all of the various past points of contention have been agreed to between the US and Iran, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. On behalf of the United States as president and also representing the countries in the Middle East, it's an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. So, in summary, duration of the deal, 14-day suspension of all military operations starting today, 8 April. Immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz for civilian, of course, and commercial vessels, but under Iranian military coordination. Formal negotiations to begin in Islamabad, Pakistan, this Friday, April 10th. The US commits to suspension of strikes on Iranian infrastructure and civilian targets. Iranians' cessation of retaliatory drone and missile attacks and the maritime blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. This all is verified, as you've just seen, but there are some disagreements as well. According to Iran, operations in Lebanon by Israel are part of this agreement, but Israel has said that's not the case. So what really jumped out to me in both of these communications, they both said it, Iran and Trump. The US has their 15-point plan. It's secret. But Iran has a 10-point plan, and that plan is the basis for the negotiations, not the US plan. So, what is this plan? What is this 10-point plan? Well, the Iranian embassy in India had this to say. They said, you started this war, but Iran will set the conditions for its end. The conditions are specifically, and the US has accepted them as workable, non-aggression, so commitment to no more attacks by the US and Israel, continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of enrichment of uranium, lifting of all sanctions, both primary, so that is against Iran directly, and secondary, that is against, for example, European companies that do business with Iran, or Chinese companies that do business with Iran. Termination of all UN security resolutions against Iran. Termination of all International Atomic Agency resolutions that have sort of condemned Iran for being too secretive with their uranium. Payment of compensation to Iran. So far, at least looking to be in the form of these $2 million per ship going through the Strait of Hormuz, but maybe there will be more. Very crucial withdrawal of US combat forces from the entire region, the entire Middle East. Cessation of the war on all fronts, including against the Islamic resistance of Lebanon. So yeah, obviously both parties are claiming victory. Trump said, yeah, we have achieved all of our objectives. Iran said, you started the war, but we are setting the conditions, so we are in the driver's seat. And yeah, I have my opinions on who clearly looks to be in control of the negotiations, but honestly, I think most of the world can now agree that we should just say, whatever, sure, you both won. Now let's just stop killing people and let's get energy and food prices back down. Please, thank you very much. But will that actually happen? Let's have a look at the economic impact so far. Most importantly, when it comes to energy, not all markets are open right now. Not all financial markets are actually open, but the ones that are show a clear trend. Here you see the price of Brent crude in blue having gone up a lot since the war, and also at the same time WTI crude, which stands for West Texas Intermediate Crude, the US index, and they have both gone up by quite a lot, but since the announcement they have gone down quite a bit. However, clearly still quite a bit above before the war levels. And actually, if we look at, for example, diesel prices from the Deutsche Börse, we see the same trend, right? So massively going up after the war and then going down a little bit now after this announcement. And the same is true for gasoline for your car and kerosene for airplanes. Which, by the way, means that it will probably take a couple of days or even 1 or 2 weeks before prices at the pump will go back to, well, not normal, but a bit lower, since they still have a lot of inventory that was very expensive to buy. Next, let's have a look at the Dutch Natural Gas Price Index, which is a proxy for Europe, which is a proxy for Asia, where the markets were not open yet. Americans have luckily so far mostly been spared, so let's have a look at European gas prices, which when the Strait of Hormuz closed, they shot up by quite a lot, then remained somewhat stable, and now you can clearly see that they have gone down quite a bit, but again, not at all at the nice level that they were before. Next, when it comes to fertilizer prices, very important. What matters most is the so-called urea, which is a type of fertilizer, future prices. But at the time of recording, these were not yet updated because the markets were closed. So have a look yourself. But I expect the same pattern to hold, a slight drop in prices. And the same goes for currencies of major emerging market economies like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the Philippines. These currencies went down by a lot because fuel import prices from the Middle East went up by a lot. So they had to buy dollars to get them. At the same time, they were getting a lot of money from workers working there in the Middle East. And that money went down by a lot. And then at the same time, global interest rates were either going up or not going down by as much as expected, because central banks all over the world were expecting inflation, and this made it much more difficult, or at least more costly, to borrow money for countries like India. So looking at the Indian rupee, for example, right after the war, it went down by quite a lot. And then, yes, it went up back a little bit, but most crucially, it went up a little bit already today. But as you can clearly see, this is really not yet a return to normal. The crisis is not over. And that, I think, is a good summary for all of these crises. Here are my 2 takeaways. 1, yes, the ceasefire is great news for the global economy. We can already see it in prices. It has slowed down the 3 major economic crises that the world was facing. But just as it took a few days before end users of gas, fuel, and food felt the impact of the start of the war, it will now take a while before you feel slightly lower prices. Which brings us to takeaway number 2. Despite ships starting to go back through the Strait of Hormuz, prices will remain higher than they were for weeks, if not months, for at least 4 reasons. Reason number 1, insurance premiums on ships going in and out of the Gulf will likely remain pretty high, making it less interesting to go in and out of the Gulf because ships are unsure if they can actually get out again. Reason number 2, ships are very slow, so even if shipping fully resumes, it will take days for shortages to get better in Asia. And then reason number 3, the war has damaged production capacity in many of the Gulf countries, and so we will feel this in energy prices for quite a while longer. And then reason number 4, countries all across the world will likely start hoarding crucial products from the Gulf for a while to prevent another massive crisis if the Strait of Hormuz closes again. Therefore, while this ceasefire is great news, the only real way out of the global economic crisis is peace, not a ceasefire. So, is peace plausible? How likely is peace? Yeah, that is the billion-dollar question. Let's be honest, the problem we have been facing so far is that nobody really knows. Even the best geopolitical experts do not know what exactly has been discussed between the foreign minister of Iran, president of Pakistan, and representatives of the US. And, of course, US President Trump has a fairly unorthodox negotiation style, to say the least. What these experts did mostly agree on, though, is that this ceasefire looks very fragile, mostly due to Israel. You see, Iran has said that part of the ceasefire agreement was that Israel stops its invasion of Lebanon, and Israel has already contradicted that. But if we forget about that for now and just focus on a potential peace agreement, how far apart are the 2 sides actually? Let's go back to the Iranian demands. How likely are they? The way I see it, there are 3 major pain points. The first is non-aggression. That is, how credible can the US really make it that they will definitely not attack again, given that they have an armada that can just sail all over the world with their airplanes and missiles? Then the second one is withdrawal of all US forces from the region, which many analysts think that no US government would ever do, although perhaps Trump will. And then third, I think this is the most tricky one, cessation of war on all fronts, including against the resistance in Lebanon, which of course means that Israel has to stick to the deal. On the other hand, the US's 15-point plan is confidential, but details that appeared in Israeli newspapers suggest that they include the following. Iran must dismantle its existing nuclear capabilities, commit to never pursue nuclear weapons, which again will be committing to that. That will be very tricky. You just have to trust them. There will be no uranium enrichment, which already clashes with the Iranian demand for uranium enrichment. Iran must hand its stockpile of uranium to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Nuclear facilities must be dismantled. Iran must abandon its regional proxy paradigm, referring to the groups like the Houthis in Yemen, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, and various militias in Iraq. Related to that, cease the funding of these regional proxies. The Strait of Hormuz must remain open and function as a free maritime corridor, which seems to clash with Iran's demand for controlling it. Iran's missile program must be limited in both range and quantity, and any future use of missiles would be restricted to self-defense. But in return, Iran would benefit by a full lifting of sanctions, so that is actually the same that Iran wants. The US would assist Iran in advancing its civilian nuclear program, so there perhaps they could both claim a win, that is what they wanted all along, supposedly, and the so-called snapback mechanism, which allows for the automatic reimposition of sanctions, so sanctions come into place immediately after Iran fails to comply, that would be removed. So as you already saw there is actually some overlap between these demands. Iran could claim victory on its civilian nuclear program, while at the same time, Trump could claim that they have abandoned their nuclear bomb ambitions. The proxy system, very importantly, meaning that Iran supported militias like the Houthis and Hezbollah, according to my interview with US-Iranian professor Nasser on Money and Macro Talks, go check it out, was largely for deterring the US and Israel. But with its control of the Strait of Hormuz, Iran now has a much stronger deterrent. So that may help to convince them that the proxies are really no longer needed. The only thing that seems super unlikely is that the US retreats from all bases, at least according to most experts. But actually, Trump could credibly claim that this is what he wanted all along because it was a core part of his 2025 national security strategy. According to this document, his administration wanted to focus on the Americas and, to a lesser extent, China, not the Middle East. So, in theory, the US and Iran are actually less far apart than you may think. However, that does not account for Israel. Israel seems to want to simply that all their regional rivals end up like Lebanon, Libya, Iraq, and Syria, a shadow of themselves, no longer able to threaten Israel in any way, shape, or form, even if that means that they are stuck in a brutal state of civil war. So, it seems in Israel's best interests to quite literally blow up this deal. But yeah, we'll have to see, won't we? What do you think? Will Trump and Iran seal the deal? Will Israel spoil the party? Let me know in the comments below. And if you find my work valuable, summarizing what's going on in the global economy with all sorts of charts and data and evidence, consider supporting the channel for the price of a coffee or matcha a month via Patreon or by becoming a member, clicking the button below.